Hi, I'm Josh Griffin. Welcome to another Death Battle prediction video, but first Ant-Man versus the Atom. The fight, as I'm glad to say, basically went exactly as I had thought. It was the overspace aspects that did lead to Ant-Man having the win. The fight basically delivered on everything that I was expecting, because I personally didn't go into it with the highest of expectations. A lot of the times your premier Marvel versus DC fight is usually a 7.5 to an 8 at the highest, so it was pretty much in that range. The animation was fun. The kill was brutal. It might be one of the more gory non-villain kills that we've had in the show, just outright, because I mean, nobody wants to have ants get enlarged inside you and eat their way out. That's scarabs. That's basically how that works. So then we have what might be the most excited that I've been for a next time since, like, we're talking season 2 days with, like, Guts versus Nightmare and Raiden versus Wolverine and Sam Fisher versus Snake. Those are the ones that I was, like, really hyped for when they got announced, and it's been so long since I've had that level of hype for a fight, which is what we're getting into next time with Dovahkiin versus Chosen Undead, or as apparently it's being posted on YouTube as Dark Souls versus Skyrim, which I get why. It's just weird. Like, the reasoning for it is basically that when it comes to YouTube views, more people would look up Dark Souls over Chosen Undead, because the names of the two characters aren't nearly as prominent as the games themselves. So it makes financial sense, because it would just help boost views and search results and things like that. It's totally fine. It's just weird. So we come to this fight, which is very, very difficult to pin down an exact winner, because what we have in this case is a situation where one of the characters is essentially unkillable from a more immortality and hacks point of view, though not conventional immortality, which we'll get into later. And then the other one just kind of stat stomps in every regard. That is the Chosen Undead for the former, Dovahkiin for the latter, because one of the things that I've learned over the course of this that I already knew before, but now I know more of the extent, is just how bonkers as a cosmology that Elder Scrolls is. Just to hammer that home, I'm just going to point out the one feat with the bow, where you shoot an arrow to the sun, which then fires back all these rays of light. Now you can, as it showed with the preview in the death battle, you can apply math and everything to that to get a good speed feat, but the speed feat stops meaning anything when you realize that space in Elder Scrolls is an infinite plane of existence, and the sun is at the end of that infinite plane of existence, which you would think negates the fact that it's infinite, but it's passing by a whole ton of infinite planes of the gods, which are what the planets are, and the two moons, which are also infinite planes of infinite mass, which this isn't even extrapolation, this isn't an assumption or something like that. This is straight up one of the writers of the game literally putting the words infinite space with an infinite mass. Like, it's such an undeniably infinite cosmology. The biggest question is going to be to what degree the Dovahkiin actually scales to it. Because obviously you have Alduin, who basically consumes the universe. You know, these infinite universes. And if the Dovahkiin fought Alduin at his peak of power, you would potentially have a very infinite level of strength and infinite level of speed. So that's why coming at this from the angle of the stats is going to be very strange and ultimately kind of pointless. Because it doesn't matter how badly the Dovahkiin kills the Chosen Undead, because the Chosen Undead's always just coming back. As they've gone over already, take away their soul, and then some of the other ones that he could do is banishing him to another plane of reality, which Chosen Undead can get back from. He's got the Black Separation Crystal, Homeward Bone, and the Homeward Spell, all of which literally bring you back to your own plane of reality, or rather, plane of reality in the Black Separation Crystal's case, and then back from elsewhere with the Homeward Bone and the Homeward Spell, though I believe they both work on interdimensional distances, because if you have, say, Ulasil, which is a different timeline, essentially, kind of, and then some of the other, like, alternate universes and things like that, you can still use them to return to a bonfire that isn't from there. So those are kind of shutting down some of the various methods that would be argued could bypass the immortality that the Chosen Undead has. A lot of people are pointing at Bend Will as the big clincher here, because it would essentially hollow the Chosen Undead on the spot. But here's the argument that I would make in this case, is that there have been times where a character cannot be considered to lose simply because of the fact that they are not dead. And it's a matter of how quickly one can return to combat. And in the comics, there are absolutely times where someone dies and within seconds they're already back up, ready to fight. And this isn't even... another misconception is that you actually require a bonfire, like a specific magic point of origin, in order to come back. But that isn't even actually true. It just requires the last place that you took respite. The example in this case is that at the start of Dark Souls 1, if you die at any point before linking another fire, you spawn back in the prison cell in the Undead Asylum where the character was sitting. And once you get to Firelink Shrine, that is where you respawn if you don't have any bonfires, even if the one that you're going back to is after Anastasia of Astora is dead, which means that the fire goes out. So it is simply the last place that was taken respite, not necessarily a bonfire. So destroying the bonfire or bringing it to another location so that Chosen Undead can't get back to the fight, those aren't going to work. And hollowing itself isn't really an option because that's not a death. It's not a permanent put down, and while there are plenty of things that hollowing does, you don't stop fighting necessarily, because even some of the most hollow characters in Dark Souls have continued to fight even after going fully hollow. Like the king in the second game, King Vendrick, it might have been. He is still capable of fighting and hits like a fucking truck, even after he is long fully hollowed. So a lot of this is going to come down to the fact that I don't think that the Dovahkiin actually has a firm method of permanently killing the Chosen Undead. No matter how powerful he is in this case, he just doesn't have the option. And one thing that I'd like to address as well is the use of the Dragon Ren shout. So the way that people word that one is that because of the fact that it takes dragons who are normally immortal, even though they really aren't, like, you kill plenty of them without it, but it basically weakens them by introducing mortality to them, and it makes them more easy to kill, and in Alduin's case specifically, it was able to essentially make him mortal, which that's the big draw of it, is that it would to them cancel out the Chosen Undead's immortality. But here's the thing, is that Chosen Undead's immortality is not centered around coming back in the way of, like, being immortal, like not being able to die. Because if the whole point of the Dragon Ren shout is that it is introducing dragons to the concept of mortality, the Chosen Undead is very well aware of the concept of mortality. They die a lot. I don't see it as a viable option in this case to remove the dark sign from them. And then transmutation is another one that people go for, like the Wabbajack being able to turn the Chosen Undead into a sweet roll. That one is also not going to work because there are spells like the Chameleon spell in Dark Souls. The description specifically states that it transforms the person. It's not an illusion or anything like that. You actually turn into that object. And even when you are transformed, you are still capable of using the dark sign to kill yourself, actually. Which in this case is a benefit. Is it a good thing? Because it prevents being turned into something from stopping the fight. He can just end himself there, come back, and go at it again. Other methods that people are bringing up is, so this is an interesting one, is the any anti-undead stuff. A lot of the anti-undead stuff is just not going to work on the Chosen Undead, because despite the fact that they're called the Chosen Undead, they are in fact neither chosen nor undead. Not in the classical sense, anyway. This is more... what the dark sign does is it is more akin to someone who is resurrected than someone who is reanimated. Like, you wouldn't say that a character who died and then had, like, say, a wish that brought someone back to life. You wouldn't necessarily say that they are undead. They would still be alive. And that is more what the dark sign does. So I don't see any of Dovahkiin's specific anti-dead abilities or spells, weapons, working in that regard. So that kind of brings us to the point where I don't really see any specific option that the Dovahkiin has that can put down the Chosen Undead. So then we come to the opposite direction, is can the Chosen Undead kill the Dovahkiin? And I think the answer is yes, though it is going to take a lot of deaths. So the insurmountable thing here is the infinite stats, which those are going to very, very heavily depend on how much Death Battle buys into Dovahkiin's scaling across the cosmology, essentially. In terms of power, as almost irrelevant as it is at this point, there are some FTL things. The angels and Dark Souls fire like beams of light that are described as light and don't contradict any of the light rules. And you can move with one of the swords in a pretty solid time frame between them. And I think it got calculated to about like 2 times the speed of light. So not immeasurable, still fast. And then we also have a good chance that there is a universe-level Dark Souls in this case, because the first flame is used to basically power every star in the universe, and which we are actually confirmed with by the stars going out in the Ringed City. All the stars are gone and the sun. So it isn't just the sun that is powered by the first flame, which it going out brings a lot of other stuff down too. There's a lot of actually corroborating evidence as well with universe level Chosen Undead, because there are other objects, like there's something in the comics called the Orb of Entremis, which specifically states that it works in tandem with the user's soul to create a dimension. This is also the case where the Dark Soul of Man, which was distributed by the Furtive Pygmy, and then later brought back together by Slave Knight Gale, that was used to actually make a new universe by a painter dragon girl. It was really vague in any other description there, but it wouldn't be Dark Souls lore if it wasn't vague as all hell. So there are other universe level arguments, and there are even higher, because you can argue that with all the timeline shenanigans that are going on, there are plenty of ways that you can not necessarily go with an infinite universe, but more or less an infinite timeline. So you could make that argument. I don't think I necessarily will. I don't think that it's necessarily a good argument, but it is one that you could go with. And while I was able to research a good chunk of things to corroborate this, I wasn't able to find anything necessarily saying about infinite timelines and things like that. I know that there is very casual temporal movement, and basically like so many universes and things like that that are colliding with each other, and interactions and times weaving through just with the basics of the PvP system and the phantoms and things like that, like Solaire is technically from his own universe. and when you summon someone, you are bringing an echo of them from their own. Brief aside for that one, I don't think Chosen Undead is going to get summons, but there is a good chance that Dovahkiin will. Chosen Undead summons are much more expressly outside help, because he has to specifically find a sign left by someone else, activate it, and then the other person has to accept and go in to help. Whereas with Dovahkiin, he's just like, hey, Deidre, you're working with me now. So I could see Dovahkiin having a solid numbers advantage, but that will ultimately only matter for one lifetime of the Chosen Undead, which are going to be very short. Back onto the main topic, though, of how Chosen Undead can kill Dovahkiin, because Dovahkiin's actually able to resist a lot of magic and things like that. The only ones that he cannot resist are Curse and a very specific one called Life Hunt. Now, you're forgiven if you played through the entirety of Dark Souls 1 and don't know what the hell Life Hunt is, because it is specifically the power that Priscilla, the crossbreed, utilizes. She was locked away in the painted world of Ariamis, where her ability is described as the antithesis of life. It is also occult in damage type, and the occult weapons are described in other descriptions as being things that were taken from Nito, the Gravelord, who basically invented the concept of death. There are theories that characters who get boss souls and things like that are able to utilize the abilities and other powers of the characters, even without the soul transposed weapons and things like that. One of the evidences of this is in Dark Souls 2. The various characters who get those original Lord Souls start to take on the attributes of the Lord Soul character who they were embodying. So that is a possible argument in its favor, at which point you would have a lot of temporal control via Gwyn, which, yeah, not a lot of people realize that he has temporal control, but one of the big things with him is that a phrase that has been bouncing around in a lot of the discussions with this is that in Dark Souls, light is time. So there's a lot of light abilities, and Gwyn is specifically stated to use light magic and time magic, as he was the one who put the enchantment onto Filionor's egg in Dark Souls 3, which led to, when that egg collapsed, it was a blink of an eye for the Ashen one, and it was hundreds of thousands of years potentially passed, however long it would take for it to have gotten to the end of the timeline there. So potentially with something like that, you could argue that the Chosen Undead would be able to land a hit during that time. And then you also have some spells such as Tranquil Walk of Peace, which basically forces both characters to go to a walk. And yes, the Dovahkiin's combat reflexes would still be able to get through, and he would still be able to move quickly, but he would not be able to run or move in that further regard, which means that they would essentially be locked at the same speed, and though Dovahkiin would definitely be able to block the attacks, he would unlikely be able to block the death manipulation from the Life Hunt weaponry, which is the dagger and the scythe. So even if they are blocked, those attributes do go through the block into the other person. And the other one is Curse, which is an instant kill, so kind of another death manipulation in a way, but it's a little bit more unclear as to whether it is strictly death manipulation or something else entirely. So the way that it works, though, is that there are not actually any weapons that the Chosen Undead is able to use that can give Curse, but Seath's magic inherently has it. And even though the spell that you can use that Big Hat Logan made does not utilize the Curse, if you go by the aspect that characters who get other characters' souls are able to use their abilities, then you would be able to use the Curse one, as well as the Moonlight Greatsword, which has a the statement that it utilizes Seath's magic, at which point there is a point in the comics where Seath uses his magic to, and I quote, unmake someone's consciousness. So there could also be mindfuckery going on there. It's more likely that Dovahkiin resists that, though, so not terribly important in the long run. Then we have the attribute that you can get cursed to someone else with a bit of a lore and gameplay quirk. So, two things that we know through two items, which is the transient curse, which is basically something that lets you hit ghosts and other intangible beings. The way that it works is that you actually give yourself a little bit of a curse, so it's a partial one. And then what you can do is use a purging stone. Now, this isn't something you can do in gameplay, but if you take a transient curse and give yourself a bit of one, and then you use a purging stone, which is basically something that it says in the description that you can take your curse and just focus it into something or someone else. And the reason why these purging stones work is because they were once actual people. So with it being said that that's why it works, there's no real reason that you wouldn't be able to simply transfer curses into other people. There are other entities that have done that. Like in the Breath of Andalus comics, there was a dragon that essentially transferred the curse into someone when the dragon itself linked the fire and basically cursed someone else to be burning for it. Which, if that's a possibility for the Chosen Undead, I don't think the Dovahkiin could survive fueling the first flame. That would probably not be viable, because it would require basically a specific location, which I don't think would be the route here. But at the end of the day, we come to the point that even as hard as it is to land these win conditions, the Chosen Undead is the only one who actually has them. So even if he hollows, even as far gone as he can go, he's still going to be alive. And that kind of gives it, like... I honestly don't know the way that Death Battle is going to call this one. If they are going to allow non-death victories, I do think Dovahkiin is going to win. But I don't see any specific way that he would be able to put him down for good if that's what they're going to rely on. I do want the Chosen Undead to win. And it's possible that there is some aspect of bias tainting my opinion, but I feel like I've fairly well justified the kind of angle that I'm tackling this one from. But I am kind of going over long, so I should probably pick one or the other, and I'm going to go with Chosen Undead. Gotta go with my boy, even though I'm only really 45% sure that he's going to win, which is not a whole ton. But I mean, if I can bring back a Death Battle meme from yesteryear, this is what the Chosen Undead does every day. He gets the absolute shit kicked out of him for days and days straight, and then eventually just comes back and gets good and wins. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to go for. The animation I'm very excited for. And yeah, I will see you guys for the next one.